Hey, Work Positive Nation, on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the highest, how great is your boss? How well does your boss give feedback or empower employees? My guest on this episode of the Work Positive Podcast is here today to help your boss revolutionize all three. He's the author of Make Work Better and CEO of BetterWorks, a company that specializes in performance management. So are you ready to revolutionize greatness, feedback, and empowerment? Then lean in, listen up, and let's go work positive.
Welcome to the Work Positive Podcast with your host, executive coach, and culture architect, Dr. Joey Fawcett. Discover strategies and tactics that work positive as Dr. Joey talks with industry leaders who create a positive work culture that attracts top talent and reduces team turnover. Discover how you can create a work positive culture that increases productivity and profits. Here's your host, Dr. Joey.
Help me, Work Positive Nation. Welcome to this episode of the Work Positive Podcast. The man some people call Papa, the rest of us call Doug Dennerline. Doug, welcome to the Work Positive Podcast.
Thanks so much for having me, Joey. Good to be here.
Yeah, so we almost renamed this podcast episode the Papa and Pop Show. We thought that would be great, but we weren't so convinced that Work Positive Nation would want to see all the pictures that would have to come.
We're just old enough to have grandchildren, so
that's it. I'm delighted to have lived this long. Some of my friends, I wasn't so sure I'd live long enough to have grandchildren.
Here we go.
Doug is the CEO of an amazing company and the author of a book, Make Work Better, and he's CEO of BetterWorks. Tell us, what does a typical day look like in your life, Doug?
Well, we are a remote first only company. And so lots of Zooms go on inside of our organization. Joey, one of the things I'm the ex-CEO of WebEx, and I ran WebEx for 3 years. And so the head of my technology team was Eric Yuan, the founder of Zoom. And so when I was running that company 10 years ago, I thought, why aren't people doing more of this kind of stuff? But it took a pandemic to teach the world that, this technology can actually be useful. And that, along with, other technologies so you can stay connected, including BetterWorks, keep your people involved regularly together. So it's worked really well for us. We have a great culture. We honor people's environment at home. We have kind of rules and regulations around how many Zooms you can do without taking a break.
Really?
And so, it's important. You can get a little burned out looking at a screen all day long. So we try to not have hour-long Zooms. We try to do 30-minute Zooms. And after 2 30-minute Zooms, we want you to have no Zoom for at least 30 minutes. And so find some time to get your work done. So again, important to think about people and the environment they have.
Zoom fatigue is real.
It is real. No question.
Having stood in this very spot for 5 or 6 hours one day, I could tell you not only were my arches falling, and yes, I'm on an anti-fatigue map, but my eyes were tired too. How'd you come up with that 2 30-minute Zooms and then 30 minutes off?
I just felt it's, the right way to give people a chance to not be staring at a screen. And, we try to get people to turn their videos on so there's a human interaction and you can see people's expression. But if you're in an environment where, you're multitasking with somebody at home, then it's okay to turn off the video. And so we just want to honor, people's current experience where they might be. We also have relationships with common workspaces that people can go to if they need to be, or if a team wants to get together. We have a few team members that are in Denver, in the Bay Area, in New York, and so they tend to a few times a week get together face to face. But largely, we run the company like this.
Yeah. So is that at their choice of time?
Yes, it is really. We leave it to the manager, if you will, to say, hey, why don't we get together for everybody what works Tuesday, Thursday, and let's do it, full day, or let's do Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or candidly, if they want to be completely remote and that works for them, then they're completely remote. The amazing part for me, Joey, and maybe the thing that clicked in my head as a CEO, is I used to like to have my teams around me, and I'm on the hire and I'm in the Bay Area. So, opening up my geographic lens just to hire amazing people wherever they happen to live, as long as it makes sense from a time zone perspective, has been fantastic to find just phenomenal talent around, the world, if you will.
And I've got to think that I believe the way you phrased it was respecting their home environment.
Yeah.
I've got to think that must attract top talent. I mean, that's easy, right? To attract top talent to that.
It is. It's going to be interesting to watch these companies that are forcing people back to the office.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of great people have realized that commute time, balancing, we have a saying here where we want you to integrate your work into your life, not your life into your work, and honor that. So be at work when you need to be at work, and be with your family when you need to be with your family. And I don't care when that is. And those kinds of, cultural values lets us bring really great people to the company. And if you look at our turnover, even in the Great Recession, which I actually think is largely over at this point, where people are losing 25 to 35% of their people annually, we were in the 5% range.
Wow.
So under 5% a couple of quarters, 3%. Now, I've often said to my team, maybe that's too low.
Yeah, I understand.
But, we have a good culture, is all I can say.
It sounds to me like you've put human back in human resources.
Well, that's what we do, Joey. I mean, probably a obvious commercial for us, but we use our own product to run the company, which is getting away from the whole notion of what we do is moving away from the annual performance review process, which is backwards looking. People hate getting it, people hate giving it, and it doesn't change performance, research shows. It's something that is much lighter weight. It's about creating conversations between individual contributor and manager on an ongoing basis. It's agreeing on goals that you want to get accomplished in a quarter, and then looking at those goals over time. Are you achieving them? And by the way, not just goals for the company, but what's the company doing for you? What are your goals internally, and how can we help you get there? And that changes the conversation. The individual saying, well, my manager actually looking at my work. They're invested in me as a person inside this company, and they're talking to me on a regular basis. So all of that creates, kind of this culture where everybody can see what everybody else's goals are. Everybody is talking to one another. And so you feel connected to work.
And you're finding meaning and purpose and satisfaction in the work, it sounds like to me, Doug.
Absolutely. It's been really interesting to watch the level of engagement that people get when we do this. So inside our own organization, we do an engagement survey using our own product twice a year. And we measure employee net promoter score, ENPS. We measure values. We ask for honest feedback about what's going on inside the organization. And then we communicate very honestly, what was the feedback? What's working well? What's not working well? And what are we going to go focus on trying to resolve and fix and make stuff better? I also do things like we have a team internally we call Lab, or Leaders at BetterWorks. And those teams meet with the core team on every month. And their job is to talk to their organizations and find out how people are feeling and what they're experiencing, and then bring that information back to the core team so we can collectively talk about how to make sure that things are moving in the direction that we want them to, and people are feeling good about what they get done every day.
What are some of the metrics you use, Doug, to measure engagement?
Yeah, well, so probably the most important is we do things like work-life balance. We do things like I have support of my manager. My manager understands my work. My manager spends time helping me achieve my goals. And then the one I love the most is I like it here so much that I would recommend this company for somebody else to come and work here too. Yeah. And that's the ENPS score that we measure on a regular basis. So industry would tell you a score of 20 plus on that or better is good, and healthy. We run somewhere between 55 and 70% in terms of the ENPS scores on a regular basis.
Wow. Well, and that's cast against a backdrop that Gallup says, 85% of all American workers are disengaged?
I think I had heard 78, but you're right. 85% of people don't understand how their work helps a company achieve what it's trying to accomplish, and they feel disengaged. when you use our product, that you can see what the top company goals are, or you're talking to your manager about what his or her goals are, and then you're creating your goals so you know that your work's actually helping the company trying to achieve what it's trying to achieve.
Well, what you've done, it sounds like to me, is make scalable what we refer to as belonging. Because if I can understand how my daily task support the company goals, and then becoming, right, if I can see through my manager, if I can see career path is too euphemistic, but my own personal development plan through that path, then I belong and I'm becoming, and no wonder you're getting engagement scores that high.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
So what would you say to someone who's not getting those engagement scores besides, hey, call us at BetterWorks, email us at BetterWorks and start using our product?
No. And Joey, it's a cultural thing. It's not a tool thing. I mean, tools support it, but if you don't do it at a cultural level, it won't matter what tool you buy.
So it's inauthentic to just buy the tool and give it lip service.
It'll fail miserably. Miserably. What you need is, in my opinion, it starts at the top. It really does. You have to have leaders that are authentic, that are, in today's world, it's not about authoritarian anymore. It's not about, right, hierarchical, I'll tell you how to do your job.
Command and control.
Having a vision, enabling people to go take some risks, go do your job. You're entitled to do that on a daily basis. And it's creating a culture where it's okay to take a risk. It's okay to fail. We call it fail fast internally. And that's not something that's seen as a negative. It's actually seen as a positive. Mm-hmm. And so we continue to try and drive that kind of behavior in the organization, and it works well for us.
Mm. So I'm thinking you're old enough, since you have three grandchildren now, to have yeah. We don't have to talk about hair, do we? Because then I'll have nothing to say. But I expect earlier in your career, Doug, you experienced that command and control, that top-down insistence. What was your experience like in making that personal transformation from repeating what you'd seen early in your career to where you are now?
Yeah, I've had a really interesting journey, Joey, in my career. Not enough time to go through my background, but I've worked for some amazing leaders and some not so amazing leaders, and both at a CEO level, but even my immediate manager. And I think my entire career, I've kind of taken what I thought worked well and what I thought didn't work well and molded that into who I wanted to be. A couple of really incredible people in my career were Rick Justice and John Chambers at Cisco Systems. And John, kind of has an amazing leadership quality in that, he calls it a family. He goes, I want to build a family and I want people around me that are part of this family. And if you look at the tenure under John's leadership, and he was the CEO, I believe, for 28 years, which is unheard of.
Wow. That's amazing in the tech industry, especially.
There were people there for 20 plus years, literally 25 years.
Wow. And
so he did build that culture. And so I've probably used that as more of a guideline for me and trying to be empathetic. And I don't want to know, if you only talk to me about work, I get very bored very quickly. I need to, like you and I did, I need to know who you are, what you're about, what's going on in your personal life, how are your kids, and that's an important quality, I think, inside the company. So most of our Zoom meetings were begun with, how are you? How's it going? What's going on with the family? And everybody we have dogs, we have cats, we have, lots of things happening on Zoom, but it's all part of the culture.
Well, and it's amazing what can happen when you integrate work and life. I find it very difficult to separate the two because work is life and life is work, right? And I don't mean that I'm a workaholic or anything, but I just mean the kinds of exchanges you and I had before this episode started. I know you rode horses as a high school student. You have grandchildren. Our daughters are about the same age. I stopped after 2. You kept going. So went on and had a third. Yeah. So, I mean, it's just that humanizing quality that allows us to empathize with each other and allows us to be vulnerable, authentic, and transparent with one another. Then when we have the conversations about work, I know Doug knows Joey. And so we can really speak to the head and the heart of the matter rather than just the head.
That's right. I think one of the qualities that we've tried to instill in the organization is feedback is a really important quality in a good company. But the feedback has to be it's about work. It's not about you as a person. It's about wanting to make you maybe better as a person and being able to hear that. But it's got to be done diplomatically. It can't be done critically. We had a saying, it's just go that you praise publicly and you criticize privately. And that criticism has got to be done in a way that people know that you're only doing it because you want to make them better. And try to do that, throughout the organization as well. And certainly my leadership team knows that quality is important to me.
Yeah, we've even discovered, Doug, that the word feedback itself is so emotionally charged and with a negative polarity. In some companies, and they're trying to make that transformation with our help as a positive culture architect, right, to a positive work culture. We even substitute the word collaborate or collaboration at times. Just say, hey, let's work together on growing you, me, and the work.
Yeah, that's good. I like that.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, it's people who get the work done, right?
And innovation from those people is what drives the U.S. economy these days. It's not the industrial era anymore. So,
right.
As an example, I'm a hard-charging CEO around artificial intelligence. If you think about what that can do to change the experience between a manager and individual contributor, it's meaningful. So now when we are in our product and you're typing up feedback to give somebody in a quarterly conversation, AI can help take over and be your co-pilot and remove bias. It can make the language professional. It can make it actionable. And so it's really meaningful information you're giving to someone that's not driven by an emotional manager. It's driven by AI removing a bunch of that stuff. And, by the way, we did a research with 1,000 participants in 20 different industries, and 66% of them said they were already using ChatGPT or AI to write reviews. Wow. And so it's happening whether companies want it to happen or not. When you do it in our platform, it's actually done in a private version of AI. And so you're not teaching some larger language model about all this private data that you're giving to someone. But it really can be meaningful now that you're giving, because part of the problem with feedback is people don't actually know how to give it.
Yes.
And so now if you're using a tool that helps you use professional language, it's got empathy in it, then you read it and you can hear it and understand it, and it's actionable. It's something you can go do to get better.
Absolutely. And to be able to create that collaboration in a language that is better heard, communicated, and therefore better heard by the recipient in their own particular communication style, just turbocharges the transformation in personal growth as well as the company achieving it. Let's go back to innovation and creativity for just a moment that you mentioned, because for me, that's where the joie de vivre of the human spirit lives, is in that innovation and creativity. The jazz is right there, right?
Yeah.
So it takes certain qualities to allow that joie de vivre to express itself. What are some of the qualities that you seek to have at BetterWorks and to help your client companies achieve that?
I think it's important, Joey, to have a very diverse set of not only people, but qualities in people. You can't hire everybody that looks and acts like you, because there's no innovation in that. So we look very carefully, and we publish it on our website, male, female, ethnicity, and we strive to make sure that we have a very cross view of people inside the organization. And you need the person that's always going to be the antagonist, and challenge. And then you need the person that, always gets along and, follows suit. And so you need a diverse set of qualities and people in order to get innovation at a level that you need.
What assessment tools do you use? I mean, there's so many out there, DISC, MBTI, some of those come to mind, but how do you create that creative environment?
Well, again, we use our own product for that. We have a full survey product. We have a listening capability inside of that. So We have a feedback mechanism inside the product, so you can ask for I just got out of a meeting with the 10 of you. Could you please provide me with some feedback on how you thought that went? We have a recognition platform that I love. So, and it's got an integration of things like Slack or Microsoft Teams, so you can give somebody recognition for something they did that was helpful, or a team that is helpful. And then we have 4 values in our company, Joey, called stretch, don't settle, do the right thing, prioritize people, and be the CEO. And we've created emojis for each of those in Slack.
Wow.
So that when someone gives somebody a recognition, you can actually hit them with an emoji of that core value inside of Slack. And so it drives the culture. When we interview people, we say interview for how those 4 values sit with you when you're doing an interview with somebody.
Wow. So there's a total integration of those values. These are not just statements that live up on a wall in a neat frame, right? You guys have integrated it into your daily cadence.
We have.
That is absolutely amazing. It shows up
all over the place. I mean, so it's fun.
Yeah, that is nice.
And we give out quarterly awards to people, and we tie it to a value.
Wow, that's incredible. Doug Dennerline is my guest on this episode of the Work Positive podcast. What's a website? Somebody's listening to this and they're like, man, I got to go find out more. What's a good website for them to go to while they're listening to us?
The word BetterWorks, one word.com. Okay. And if you feel free to email me. I'm Doug at BetterWorks.com. Okay. If you want more information, I'm happy to talk to you directly.
Sweet. So what are some challenges you're discovering, both within BetterWorks as well as corporate clients with whom you're working? What are some challenges to creating the kind of positive work culture that you're talking about, Doug?
It's interesting, Joey. Now, having been around the HR space I'm the ex-president of Success Factors. And so I've been selling HCM software for quite a while now. Is to see how many companies, every HR leader in the world knows that the annual review process, is not effective, but yet it's tied to so many downstream things that happen in HR, like who's going to get the rewards and compensation and all that they continue to do it. And what I see when we find an HR leader and a CEO who know how powerful, if they change some of these processes internally, will be to their culture, and are brave enough to go down the path to actually do it. Because it takes work. It takes 3 or 4 quarters, maybe a year of this process, because it's different for people. But if they only saw the benefit when you get to the other side of that, on your culture, on the increase in engagement scores, people feeling like they belong in a way they didn't belong before, that it's really powerful. So it's what we look for is what I call an operationally minded HR person who knows their job isn't just around HR processes. It's to challenge the CEO and say, those things we're doing with our people, they're horrible and we need to change it. And here's the benefit of the change. And we need a CEO to say, please challenge me, Mr. or Mrs. HR person, and help me build the culture I need to in the company. Because the irony is most of the CEOs and the leadership that reports to the CEO actually don't do those processes internally. They let everybody else go through that performance review process. They're like, I already know who you are, and I'm going to give you a good raise. And so they don't even know what they're putting their people through in terms of down in the organization.
Yeah, they really insulate themselves from that because we're the C-suite, and so we already know what we need to know, and we're just going to continue leading out this way.
Be brave enough to change.
Wow. So we're talking about that basic human resistance to change. Your twin granddaughters are probably the only people you and I would know that wake up in the morning wanting to change, right? The rest of us are wanting to entrench 100%. In the familiar. And of course, we could sit here and geek out on the neuroscience behind the familiar, right? Why we choose that. Doug, what kind of pain does it take for the C-suite to get the picture and move forward? I mean, is it always a bottom line pain that drives this kind of change?
Yeah, unfortunately, it really is, Joey. It's somebody where we see that people will make a move is they're seeing turnover in a way that they cannot keep up with, and the expense of it is horrendous. They're being challenged by their competitors and are losing. And so they want to It's some kind of thing that, when everything's going great and the stock price is great, and
Yep.
they're like, why would we do any of these changes? It's all working. And so, I think unfortunately, it takes a little bit of stress before people have the energy to get their head around it.
Well, growth always lies just beyond the edge of our comfort zone, right? So,
or the other thing that works really well is a new CEO that knows how important these processes are and says, what are we doing here? We're going to change.
yeah, and that takes a board who's looking for new direction. So they've experienced some pain, whether loss of shareholder. So to begin to move from just shareholder mentality to shareholder and stakeholder mentality, then becomes the path to progress. But it takes pain to move us out of that.
Well, the other thing, Joey, that strikes me is if you think about the workforce being dominantly millennial or younger, their expectations of what happened at work is very different than yours and mine.
Yes.
And if you don't start to build processes that they're attached to, that they can connect to, in the book, Make Work Better, one of the things I would say to people, interviewees need to go into an organization and say, can you tell me how you're going to manage me? What's your process around performance? Are you still, and just listen to the answer. Are they still doing all these old antiquated things with bell curves and 15% in the top of the curve and 10% in the bottom? And or have they moved to something that is meaningful for the individual?
Yeah. Okay. You mentioned a book, Make Work Better. Tell us more about that.
Well, it's interesting. It's a woman that I've worked with multiple times now, and we've been together for years, was the head of a very large jet company out of Toronto, Canada. And she was head of global talent. And she was doing amazing things with the CEO to literally change the culture. And this is when I was at SuccessFactors, and I found her dynamic. She was smart. She would prepare decks on what the changes would bring to the organization and take those to leadership. So I hired her at SuccessFactors to be someone that can work with me to help HR people understand the benefit of the change and being able to present that to leadership. So this book is really Jamie and I looking at it from me as a CEO, saying, this is what, when a strong CEO wants to have an amazing culture, what they look for in an HR leader. And it's an HR person saying, what do they need to look for in a CEO that's going to enable them to work together to bring this amazing cultural shift inside an organization? And it's the roadmap for a company to go down that path to get there.
Oh, there's the magic word, the phrase that pays, the roadmap, so we can learn from your experiences and put it into practice in our own. So again, the name of the book is Make Work Better. In the show notes, there's a link to that book so that you can go get your copy now. But Doug, you're doing something really kind for Work Positive Nation.
Yeah, what I'd love to offer people is if you just send an email to pr@betterworks.com, we'll happily send you out a book. What we'll do is you'll get an email from an outside firm that manages this process for us. They'll ask you for your address. It's not something that we would get. It goes directly to this third party, and they will ship a book to you.
Oh,
at no expense.
We don't even have to pay shipping and handling, huh?
You do not.
Wow.
All you have to do is read it.
Past the third chapter, right? That's where so many people stop reading, is at that third chapter. Well, that is so kind and generous, and I think just speaks amazing volumes about you, Doug, and also about your company, BetterWorks, in that you want to share the abundance that you've discovered in creating a positive work culture. So that's very kind. Thanks for doing that for Work Positive Nation. That email address, by the way, Work Positive Nation, is also in the show notes in case you want to jot it down. It's pr@betterworks.com. But you can just go down and click on that if you're walking the dog or on the Peloton or riding a horse while you're listening to this, right? Or playing with a grandchild while watching a grandchild take a nap. Doug, thanks so much for your time today. But before I let you go, Work Positive Nation always wants to know one thing from my guests. So what's your one thing, Doug Dennerline, that Work Positive Nation can do starting today to create a positive work culture?
Well, for me, it's literally how I live my life. And it's every person you meet today, show them respect. Be kind.
What are some ways that you show respect and kindness, besides giving us a free copy of your book?
Well, I have a thing with my kids when they were growing up, and this is kind of how it is. I I would say to them, when you meet someone, you shake their hand. And so I know that they would look people in the eye. I would ask them the person's eye color when they finish shaking their hand.
I love it.
And then you also have to ask them something about themselves, not about work. It's how are you? How's your day? And learn something about them when you meet somebody that you've never met before.
I absolutely love that. Thank you so much, Doug. And the amazing thing is not only does your work culture become more positive, but the world becomes a better, I like to think, even more peaceful place when we look each other in the eye and ask.
And we need that, don't we, Joey?
I do every day. In fact, Doug, full candor, my 2024 word is peace.
Nice. A good one. A good one.
Yeah, exactly. And so may we all look each other in the eye, say, how are you? And mean it so much so that we can share the eye color of the person. I love that. Doug Dennerline has been my guest on this episode of the Work Positive Podcast. Doug, you're amazing. I'm better for this conversation today, and I know Work Positive Nation is as well.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Work Positive Podcast. Please share this podcast with your friends who are HR and small business leaders so they can do one thing today to create a positive work culture that increases productivity and profits. I'd like to give you a free Work Positive course just for listening. It's called Something to Talk About, and it's transformed the work conversations of so many people all over the world. Get your free copy when you go to workpositive.today/something to talk about, and you can start transforming your conversations today. Remember, it pays to work positive.